Dependency and addiction always feel like they will never exist in your world. Like those sorts of problems are a million miles away. But one thing that is a misconception in the world of drugs is that you do not have to be the user to be affected by the dependency of drugs and alcohol. For one college student, as well as millions of other friends and family members, this is how the world of drugs came knocking at their door. All the way from Glendale, Arizona, Hugo, a sophomore at Aurora University, experienced tragedy about 1,700 miles away from home. He has a great passion for the sport of lacrosse. In fact, it is why he chose to leave his home state of Arizona to come all the way to Illinois. What he expected when he arrived in Illinois was to have a great college experience. But his freshman year, in the hallways of Memorial Hall, Hugo lives with a tragedy he will never forget.
Came into contact with them once I received the letter. It was about a week before I was supposed to move in. And I didn't know how good of a fit they were. After looking them up on Facebook and stuff and just seeing them, I could tell that they were a lot different. And then I sent them both each a text message saying, I'm Hugo Casey, I'm your roommate. I hope we have a good year together, just to get to know them. And the first questions they asked me, do I smoke weed, and what drinks do I like?
His two freshman roommates, who he had grown close with, experimented heavily with illegal drugs, alcohol, and prescription pills.
It was like my first official day, like being on my own, and they drank the second night in a row. But this time they seemed a little, I would say, wild. They were more wild than they were the last night, but they had drank the same amount. And it didn't come to me, at the time, but later in the weeks, I realized that they were on drugs as well. And, they got into an altercation, and I was trying to stop them because I wasn't used to that lifestyle. And, I was hit. One of the roommates hit me in the face, and I didn't really know what to do. They started breaking everything. My parents had bought me a fan. They broke it into pieces. They destroyed it. Their stuff they were destroying. So the first night I was here, I just sat in the stands of the football field for 5 to 6 hours until it was daytime.
So what kind of drugs were they using? What sort of prescription pills exactly?
They were using Xanax.
Xanax is a benzodiazepine drug. It's used primarily in treatment to treat anxiety and social anxiety, panic disorders, those kinds of things. It's a very effective drug when prescribed appropriately by a psychiatrist, preferably, and if it's in conjunction with good psychosocial treatment. Xanax, in the United States, we use a classification system. It's called scheduling of drugs, and drugs are scheduled according to their medical use, their abuse potential, and their potential for dependence. The most restrictive drugs are Schedule 1 drugs. Those would be like heroin, no medical use, very addictive. It goes down 2, 3, and 4. Xanax is actually a Schedule 4 drug, which implies that it has very low abuse potential and low rates of dependence. As a substance abuse treatment provider, I disagree with that classification. So there's this belief that these drugs are relatively safe. They don't have a lot of dependence potential. They're really, the reason they have that safety profile is that it's very difficult to overdose on these drugs. However, when you combine them with other drugs, you get the situation that your friend was.
The night where I'd say my life definitely changed. It was October 18th. It was a Sunday, and we were watching a football game. We were watching the Jets play I believe the Texans, and it was a fun night. It was October, so we started to get to know each other as roommates. We were getting along, but they obviously had drug issues and alcohol issues and all that. And throughout the night, the football player, he was just doing his daily, he had drugs on a daily, regular basis. But this night, it was different. It was, he had lost track of how many he was taking. And, it was around halftime of the football game. I told him, Corey, you should probably stop because, you've taken a lot of those. I think you're past 8 or 9. And he said, don't worry about it. I know what I'm doing. It's, I do this all the time. And he just kept taking them and taking them. And, I started to get worried, but he didn't show any signs of being different from what he actually was. And my teammate also took the Xanax with him. And after the game, me and my teammate went to go get food from the spot, and then we came back, we all went to sleep. The next day around 3 a.m., my roommate, Peter, he woke me up and he said Corey was making a lot of odd noises, and he tried to wake him up and he won't wake up. So I jumped out of bed, not knowing if he was joking with me or not, and we turned on the lights, and he was on his stomach, so you couldn't see anything at first. So I shook him like 2 or 3 times, and he didn't really respond. But he was making odd sounds. So we flip him over on his back, and his eyes are just yellow. He had blood coming out of his nose and his mouth, and there was I don't know how to describe it, like pus as well as blood. And there's blood all over his bed, and we went to inform our RA because we both didn't know what to do, and they called the ambulance. And the next day, my roommate Peter was pretty broken up about him going to the hospital and overdosing, and for some reason he took all the pills from our other roommate, and he hid them from the police because he didn't want his roommate to get in trouble. But after seeing everything that had just happened with Corey, he still decided to drink alcohol and do more pills. And this all happened within a 24-hour period. He had overdosed as well, and it seemed within that week it seemed like it was going to be fine. But then the following weekend, on Saturday, I was in the library. I was studying for a midterm, and I was told by a fellow friend of ours, or a mutual friend of ours, that our roommate Corey had passed away in the hospital. That his liver and his kidneys failed.
Unfamiliar with this crazy lifestyle, the closest thing Hugo had to family in Illinois often left him with anxiety and uncertainty.
I've dealt with relatives, passing away, but that was from old age. You know, it wasn't something like this. I never had lived with someone that wasn't my family member. So it was difficult to process. It was difficult to handle. I called my parents, and I just broke down on the phone. I didn't know, you know, I asked them why they sent me to this horrible place. I just felt broken, and you know, I could tell from my parents' reaction and their voice that they were just completely hopeless. You know,
it is a time-honored adage, if you will, a belief in the treatment community that addiction is a family disease. It impacts, obviously, the person who is chemically dependent, but in my experience, I think it impacts the family more greatly. The behaviors that chemical dependence imposes upon a person, the behaviors are very nasty, and they're not to be excused, but they're signs and symptoms of the disorder. And it's very confusing to family members to see this person who you've not known as a liar and a cheat and someone who is irresponsible all of a sudden be exhibiting these kinds of behaviors. It's very, very confusing for the family members. The addict is very adept at using denial and confusion to allow the disease to keep progressing. People in the family try all kinds of strategies. They try to control the use. They justify it. They make excuses for the person. All these behaviors are just enabling. They think they're really trying to help, but they're really enabling the disease to continue to run its course.
The Xanax was prescribed to his mother. His mother stopped taking them, and so he had told me that there was so much Xanax in his house that she would never know if it was gone or not. So that's why he started taking it. I had to give out statements to the police officers that, you know, Corey was taking drugs, that Peter was also taking drugs, and how he obtained the drugs was from his mother. Corey's mother, I met her, and all she did was blame me. She, you know, I will never forget this as long as I live. She told me, "My son is dead because of you. You brought these drugs upon him. My boy was a good boy, and now he's gone because you took him from me." And just to hear someone accuse you of taking someone's life, you know, it was pretty life-changing. It was upsetting, you know. I understand she was grieving, you know, her only son, her only child was taken from her.
Blame is a very big part of denial for family members. It's very difficult to blame what it was. It was the disease, it was the disorder, it was the choices imposed upon the person who consumed the drugs that died. His friends didn't make him do that, but that's a very common theme that I hear in treatment with people. Well, if we just keep him away from here and from there, and that never really addresses the problem, that the problem is sitting right in front of you. It's a person with substance dependence.
Outreach groups like Al-Anon, Alateen, and Nar-Anon are dedicated to give strength and hope to friends and families of both problem drinkers and those addicted to narcotics and other drugs. Nationwide, these organizations arrange places for those struggling with addicted loved ones to meet.
Al-Anon and Alateen are very effective. Unfortunately, Alateen is not as well represented in this area. There needs to be more programs because I think of the family disease concept, those who are impacted the most significantly are the children. They're involved, you know. Their environment makes no sense, and that's one thing that kids need to know is their stability and certainty when they come home every day, and they don't have that. So for them, Alateen definitely the most effective treatment programs, the research shows and my anecdotal experience shows, the most effective treatment programs have strong family components. You have to treat the whole system. Obviously, outside of formal treatment, there are support groups that are out there. You need to talk your way through it. It's not something that they can bear alone. formalized therapy is always beneficial, and that would be the recommendation I would make to anyone who has suffered those kinds of losses.
Today, Hugo has learned to move on. Although he is reminded on occasion of everything that took place, Hugo credits his family, the presence of roommates he felt he could connect with, and his lacrosse coach for being a kind of father figure while stranded in Illinois.
I think I'm doing a lot better in my life. I'm a lot happier than I was. I'm showing emotion. I have trouble communicating at times, but I have a great set of roommates that has really helped. There are a bunch of guys that, we get along, we understand each other, and I have definitely made relationships with them that I hope will be lifelong.
People have to be very direct in how it's impacting them, and very direct about what they will and will not tolerate. You get offer the service, like I said, get the services of a trained interventionists. They're available and they're there. Give those mandates. Don't feel bad about giving a mandate that either you go in treatment or you're out of here. I can't live like this anymore. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult to do. We want to protect our family members. We want to make sure that they're okay.
When you're a freshman, you have all this freedom, and you can drink as much as you want. You can do any drug you want to without your parents finding out. You can make all the wrong life choices, but they never think that I could be a victim of drugs. I can be a victim of alcohol. And I guess my advice would just be careful. Just because you have the freedom doesn't mean you should go forth and, make bad life choices that negatively affect your life and the people around you, like your family, your roommates, your friends, because this could happen to anyone.
He is on track to continue his dream, as he will return to playing NCAA lacrosse in spring of 2015. If you or a loved one is currently seeking help about a family member or friend dealing with an addiction or a dependency to drugs, you can reach the following locations by calling these numbers for Al-Anon and Alateen below. For Nar-Anon, you can help start a meeting place for the Chicagoland area by emailing the following address: